Today, U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley sparring with her Russian counterpart over chemical weapons in Syria. Roll tape.
Russia is supposed to be a guarantor of the removal of chemical weapons from Syria. Think about that. Russia is supposed to have removed all the chemical weapons from Syria. But obviously, that has not happened, as innocent Syrians continue to be murdered in chemical attacks. Let's think about the possible reasons for Russia's failure.
This all ahead of Secretary of State Rex Tillerson's visit to Moscow next week. Joining me now, Alexander Vershbow and Peter Brookes. Alexander, let me start with you. A lot of pretty harsh words coming out of Russia, some official, perhaps some not official, but we're hearing from Medvedev. The U.S. strikes, he said, were just one step away from a military clash with Russia. And, of course, they seem pretty determined to stay behind Assad and perhaps continue to push the envelope.
Well, that's not surprising. We have dealt a pretty strong blow to their client in Syria. But it remains to be seen whether this reaction is going to be a lasting one or whether they will try to find a way to continue to work with us. The administration made very clear that these strikes are focused on dealing with the place that launched the attacks, the chemical weapons attacks. It's not part of a wider campaign to go after the whole Assad regime. So the Russians may, have done things like suspending the agreement between the Pentagon and their Ministry of Defense to deconflict. But the foreign minister said he hopes that the negative effect on the relationship won't be irreversible. So things may settle down after a while.
Peter, we also know, though, that there will be additional sanctions from the Trump administration. We're not sure exactly what they'll be, but certainly they're going to ratchet up and they're going to follow these attacks with more of an economic approach to this. So the pressure is going to be on, and I'm sure Assad is probably asking Russia or Vladimir Putin, can we show a braver face than this? Can we retaliate stronger? Perhaps he's not.
Well, we're going to have to see what these sanctions are, but I think putting pressure on the regime is important to ensure that you deter them from using these horrific weapons again, that they don't decide to undertake this and just ignore this punishment. I sense that Bashar al-Assad will probably take this on board. The big question, as the ambassador said, is how do the Russians react? And everybody's going to be watching very closely this meeting next week between Secretary of State Tillerson and his counterparts in Moscow, which I think is on Tuesday or Wednesday. So probably a lot of sober, frank talk at that point.
Ambassador, taking chemical weapons out of the equation, if they aren't used anymore, but Assad continues with his sort of rebound in that nation, because it looked like at one point he was on the verge of an exit, sort of unlike some of the other dictators in the region. Is there any place that America will have to step up, or do we watch this from afar and say, let them fight each other?
Well, that's the dilemma that the president now faces, and it was the same dilemma that President Obama faced. Yes, it's good to prevent them from using the chemical weapons any further, because those really are horrific. But he still has all kinds of other weapons, barrel bombs, conventional weapons, to terrorize his own people, and he's been doing that pretty effectively for several years. So he may not relent, and if we really want to bring this civil war to an end, we have to perhaps bring more pressure to bear on him and on the Russians, because the Russians ultimately have to answer for the behavior of their client. They've been trying to cover up for what he's done, denying the evidence that's quite clear to everybody else. So Tillerson does have a tough message to deliver. The Russians have to make a choice. Are they going to stick with Assad or try to end this war?
Speaking of messages, real quick, Peter, obviously this strike went beyond just Syria. It was a message to all the bad actors out there, and also to their folks who use them as proxies in the case of China and Russia. How effective was that message to those people?
Well, I was actually quite surprised that the president decided to do this while President Xi was in town. I thought he might wait till after he left, but that was a very strong message. While President Xi of China is at Mar-a-Lago to go ahead with this strike, I think it does send a very strong message that this president has resolve. Everybody's been trying to take a measure of him, and I think now they have a pretty good sense that if American interests are jeopardized, that he will act decisively. So I think they'll hear this in North Korea and in Tehran and in Moscow and anybody else who wants to work against us or against our interests.
Yeah, you kind of get a sense that at the dinner last night. President Trump says, how's the steak? Good. Oh, we just bombed Syria. And let's talk about North Korea during dessert. All right, guys, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
The major averages ended the day lower, but I got to tell you, they were all over the place. Here's the big news. They were able to shrug off the weak jobs report and tensions in the Middle East. So what does it mean? I've got my